Welcome to the Vine Life Podcast. I'm Tony Clark, your host. Today I had the privilege of interviewing Preston Gillham. He's a writer, speaker, and also a leadership guide. We discussed Preston's latest work, Swagger. We also discussed the vital importance of critical thinking in our world today. In addition, we discussed the person of Jesus Christ, and when looking into the claims of Jesus, how critical thinking is vitally important. This is part 1 of 2 of the interview. I hope that you enjoy. Well, Preston, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Who is Preston Gillham?
Sure, I'll do my best, Tony. So I am located in Fort Worth, Texas, and I've lived here for nearly 40 years. Grew up in Oklahoma, so I'm an Okie born and bred, and I guess when I die, I'll be an Okie dead. But went to school in Missouri, trained as a therapist, was in private practice for a number of years, realized I didn't really like doing that kind of work and wanted to do something else. So ran a nonprofit for 30 plus years, co-founded it, and ran that. And then in 2008, so what's that, 13 years ago, I guess, I selected a successor for myself, rebuilt the board of directors, streamlined the organization, and handed the whole thing off to the next generation of folks. And I set up an office in my house to write. And so I primarily spend my time writing. I do spend some time, if people ask, I'll go in and help with some sort of a leadership development, strategic initiative kind of a thing, if I feel like it's something that interests me and that I can be a contributor to. But far and away, I spend most of my time at my keyboard. A lot of that is in the fiction world. So I live in two worlds. I have a completely different set of friends that are invisible to everyone but me. I'm married to Diane. She just retired from teaching the little people, pre-K kids, 4-year-olds. And those kids all had to qualify to be in her program. And the way they qualified was being at risk of not doing well academically. So she had an interesting group of kids and so forth. She's happy to be retired, and she's living large and reading and doing the things that she likes to do. We have twins, Alex and Anna. They would be 18 years old now, but they live in heaven, both of them. And so we don't have any kids in the house. We have a bunch of surrogates that are scattered around instead.
Wow, that's quite a resume. And you mentioned that your children live in heaven. Preston, would you mind elaborating on that just a little bit? What do you mean that they live currently in heaven?
Well, yeah, so they died in utero, and it's quite a fascinating story. Obviously, there was difficulty for us with pregnancy, and they were quite the surprise. Both of us had long ago given up on having kids. And so as one of the doctors or nurses or somebody said when we discovered that Diane was pregnant, it was shock and awe for Diane and shock on my part, because I realized, I just, ran the numbers in my head. I'm too old now to provide for these kids well and all that sort of thing. But anyway, yeah, they passed in utero, but Diane and I believe that they were very much people and very much our kids. And one of the ladies that ran one of the sonograms for us, it was very touching, actually, because Diane was, I guess she was 39 when she was pregnant. Was considered high risk, so they sent us for these sonograms. And I mean, they ran, I don't remember how many pictures, but it was a lot of pictures. And young lady was the tech and did a great job, et cetera. And then I don't remember, 8 weeks later, something like that, we're back there because Diane has lost the kids. And we're back for her to do a sonogram to see, Diane's condition, and if any sort of follow-up procedure was necessary, et cetera. And so anyway, I asked this young lady, I said, would it be possible for me to have a picture of from the previous visit? And she was very sympathetic and very empathetic. She said, there's no way I can do that. It's against rules, et cetera, and which I understood. But anyway, radiologist came in, there was some movement and whatnot. He left. So I guess, no, he didn't. He was still in there, but we were leaving. And this young woman sidled up really close to me, like right up against me, intimately close, and slipped me pictures of both kids, sonogram pictures. And so anyway, they hang on our family wall. Their pictures hang on our family wall, just like the rest of our family does. And one of these days we will meet them again.
It's amazing. What a reunion that will be, right?
Yeah. I just hope nobody has taught them to fly fish yet. I want the privilege of being able to do that for my kids.
And I read in some of your writings, you're quite the fly fisherman. Is that correct?
Well, I think of myself as quite the fly fisherman. Now, whether I am or not, I don't know. But I do whip the air and the water with my fly. I love it. It's a great hobby, and I'm perfectly happy to fish. And if I don't catch anything, I'm still happy. But if I catch something, then that's a bonus.
Preston, you mentioned that you're an author. One of your latest works is called Swagger, and I've had the privilege of reading through this book. And chapter 2 is called Rules. You state the theme of Swagger is critical thinking in chapter 2, and you also say that I tell you what I think in these chapters, but my motive for doing so is a sincere attempt to help you think, not tell you what to think or give you answers to these questions. And my question to you is, why the heck is being told what to think not okay? In other words, why should I be a critical thinker instead of being told what to think and then following those rules?
Well, I guess I would temper what you said just a touch, Tony. I don't think it's wrong to tell someone what to think per se, but a person gets a whole lot more benefit if they learn how to do that for themselves. So it's the old principle of I can either give you a fish or I can teach you to fish. And on important subjects, I tell the reader in places what I think, and I mean it's no mystery really probably where I land on the topics that are in the book, but I tell the reader that because I want to demonstrate how I got there, and I want to kind of open up a window if I can to my head, and here's what's going on in my head as I think about this subject. Here are the kinds of questions. So I try to paint a picture, if you will, of what I believe it looks like, feels like, sounds like to think, and to think critically, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? And so I mean, that's my goal, that's my effort. The reason I think it's important is because you've got to learn to think for yourself, and you've got to learn how you manage that. And it's not a simple kind of a thing. It's very much a skill that you build and then develop. And part of being a human being, I guess, or at least an effective human being, is improving and growing and developing how you manage life and so forth. It's what we would think of as becoming a person that's wise, or someone that has, as we might say in this part of the world, somebody that has horse sense. You know how to just think through where you are. So if I can help somebody learn to do that and give them these chapters of things that I feel are important topics to think about, then hopefully the reader will be engaged and will engage the process. And in so doing, think about important subjects while learning how to think critically in the process.
Preston, is it hard to learn to think critically when all that we feed on is Twitter and social media? Or what's your opinion on that?
I don't think it's hard. I think it's impossible. There is simply no way to process a complex thought in, I think Twitter's allowing 233 characters now. There's simply no way to think deeply about a subject in a snippet, nor is there really any way to think in a developed, critical manner by listening to sound bites, nor is it possible for you to really be able to come to in-depth kinds of conclusions when you're listening to people, the media, who are biased by design. They have to be. They got to have a story every day, and that story's got to be a good story. It's got to have a hook. It's got to have conflict in it. And there's got to be ratings that will justify the advertiser's dollar, their return on investment. That is hardly an unbiased system. It is what it is. I'm not being critical, but we've got to open our eyes and realize that whoever the talking heads are not necessarily giving us an unvarnished look at the truth. We've got to be able to go think about those things for ourselves. And as our media outlets have become more and more strident with a given opinion, and as they have proliferated, there's literally thousands of news channels now and so forth, it gets really tricky to figure out what's going on here, and how do I manage this? And that's a real problem. For example, take the whole pandemic, the COVID pandemic that we're all living through right now. There are people who look the camera eye, square in the eye and give us the unvarnished truth as best as they can. And then there are others who are lying through their teeth. The trick is you can't tell who's telling you what. And everybody claims to be following the science and et cetera. We're very divided over this, so it's an extremely emotional kind of a thing. People are losing their jobs over, it's tense. That's a really tough environment to think your way through. And so I try to, I guess I mentioned the pandemic some in Swagger, but it's not a topic that I try to focus on per se. But there are plenty of difficult topics that are in that book that I hope give us a design for how we manage ourselves when how to manage isn't really evident.
Continuing along those lines, in chapter 3, you write about relativism or relative truth. In my understanding, that means whatever someone calls true and adopts what they declare their own truth to be. And you illustrated this lesson, I guess, but you gave the illustration or the story about how at some point in the past you were lost in the Colorado woods on a camping trip or a hunting trip. And this was before, my understanding is before the a GPS or before Siri. And your explanation for getting lost was you're failing to adjust for declination on your compass.
Yeah.
My question to you Preston, is what the heck is declination, and how does this relate to relativism in our society today?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I had gone with two friends, Mel and Charlie, and they were hunting elk. I was along for the ride. I was ballast. And so they gave me the meaningful job of being navigator. And you're exactly right. If there was a GPS to be had, I didn't own one. And so this was very much a paper map and a magnetic compass kind of a task. So in my case, the map is what's true. And if we're going to successfully navigate, then I've got to be able to correlate the compass with the map. The trick is what you have identified there as declination or magnetic declination. So not to get too far off into the weeds here, but the magnetic North Pole and the North Pole, as in the place where Santa lives, those are two different places. And the North Pole, where Santa is at the very top of the globe, and the magnetic North Pole is over in Hudson Bay, actually. And so a map will give you a perspective that is true north, and then it'll give you a little diagram down in the bottom of it that will help you understand how much your compass is misreading true north from magnetic north. And that measurement, whatever it is called declination. I say whatever it is. It grows by degrees the further east or west that you go. And so if you're in Nashville, Tennessee, there is no declination because the 0 degree line runs through Nashville. If you're in Fort Worth, your declination is 8 degrees. If you're out in Colorado, your declination is 12 degrees. So, as I say in the book, if you're walking a quarter of a mile and aiming for a town and you forget to adjust your compass for declination, it's not a problem. You're going to see the town. In our case, we were headed back to our truck, which was about 4 miles or so in the dark, and I forgot to adjust for declination. So, in other words, we missed our truck by 4,500 feet, or 3/4 or better of a mile. And so the point is, I wanted desperately to be able to say that I knew what I was doing, that I've not made a mistake, that the map was wrong. And of course, that's foolishness. The map is the benchmark. I mean, it's the map. And we missed where we were going because I failed to adjust the compass properly. The illustration is that there are truths in our society. There's all kinds of truths. There's scientific truth. There's the law of gravity. You jump off the house, you're going to fall hard, and so forth. And there's all kinds of these truths inside of every field of study. And all of those truths then act like a map for our culture. And if we follow those truths, then they will guide us and they will lead us. If we fail to follow those, then we'll get lost, just like Mel and Charlie and I did because I failed to use the compass correctly. Where we are today is that we as a culture, broadly speaking, are pushing back against the cultural truths or the cultural norms that have been established for a lot of years. There's lots of reasons for this, but that's what we're doing. And when that happens, then we begin to drift as a society. The trick then is the same for society as it was for me. I was proud of being able to navigate through the woods in the dark with a compass. When I failed, I was embarrassed. I really wanted to deny that I had made a mistake. But, the better part of humility is that's what you got to do if you don't want to sleep under a tree in the woods. And as a culture, we're in that same place. Our choices are really kind of two, to oversimplify. We can find the humility and say, you know what? We are lost. We have made a mistake. If we do that, then C.S. Lewis says the quickest person to realize I'm on the wrong road and turn around is actually the most progressive person. Everybody else just continuing to move forward and say they're progressing is foolishness. They're on the move, but they're lost. The second option is for us to say, well, I really don't want to admit that I have made a mistake or that I'm lost. And so I will just declare wherever I am my new truth. It'd be like me saying to Mel and Charlie, oh, hey, guys, I've been in the woods a lot. I trust my gut. And I fold up my map and I put it in my pocket and stuff my compass in my pack and say, follow me, guys, we're going this way. Well, they might follow me, but they're just going to follow me deeper into the woods. The only truth in this illustration is folded up in my pocket. And for us as a society, we can declare all of these relative truths, things that I want to be so just because I think they serve me. But in reality, what I'm doing with that relativism, that relative truth, is I'm simply making things worse by getting myself more lost.
You mentioned some important points, Preston, and I see this as there's a passage that I looked up that your book reminded me of, and you may have this in your book, but it's in Judges 21:25, and it says, in those days, speaking to the nation of Israel, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And this reminded me so much of the illustration that you just gave. And in our society today, it seems like we can self-identify with any truth that we want, but we're not adjusting that declination the way that we should. We're going every way that we want to go instead of where truth would take us. And that kind of goes on to I wanted to discuss what is truth and the person of Jesus Christ. And you mentioned in chapter 15, you spoke about this historical figure of Jesus Christ, and you stated this. You stated, we judge people based upon what they declare about themselves. And you use the illustration that you state that you are a writer, and your books can be purchased and read, and a person can conclude that you are who you claim to be. And for those that want to critically think, and not just think what people tell them to think or social media tells them, but they have an investigative heart. They want to critically think. What would you say to them, to that person, about the person of Jesus Christ? Where would they start?
Yeah, I think you have to take anyone, including Jesus Christ, at face value. What do you say about yourself? And then you evaluate a person based upon what they declare of themselves. My neighbor 2 doors down says that he flies a 777 for American Airlines. He either does or he doesn't. I say I'm a writer. As you point out, you can go and search my name, and there I'll be. And the books that I've written and the articles and so forth will, sequentially list out in your search engine. The same with Jesus Christ. He claimed to be God. So the people that say, "Oh yes, I believe in Jesus. He was a a good moral teacher. He was a great man. He was a prophet. Um, those may be aspects of some derivation of something that's true of him, but it's not the essence of who he claimed to be. He claimed to be God. And so, if I'm really serious about considering the person of Jesus Christ, it's really quite simple. I just simply go and think through whether or not what he claimed is true. There are several ways to go at that. The most direct, of course, would be to go to the Bible, which is the most complete collection of the life of Jesus Christ. I would, if you go that route, I would suggest that you start in with your reading in what's in the book of John. You can find it in the table of contents of your Bible. And the reason I suggest that is because John, who wrote that book, spends the most dedicated time of any of the biblical writers talking specifically about the person identity of Jesus Christ. You could also go and read a guy like Lee Strobel, for example, The Case for Christ. There's a very small book that has a great chapter on Jesus Christ written by a guy named McDowell called More Than a Carpenter. That'd be an easy thing to go and do. If you wanted something a little more philosophical, then the writings of C.S. Lewis would be a great place to go and look. There's an older writer by the name of Francis Schaeffer that would be a good resource as well. There are many, many people over the last 2,000 years who have asked this question about Jesus Christ. So there's lots of ways to go read and think about this. Of course, we're now back to your ability to actually think your way through what you read. Not everyone who writes a book is being honest about what they're doing. So if you pick up a book and you realize the logic is flawed or the reasoning is pithy, lay it aside. Life's too short to read a bad book. Go find a great book. These that I've mentioned are ones that I can recommend to you. And so again, I'd start with either the book of John in the Bible or The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel.
Very good books. Thank you for joining me for my interview with Preston Gillham. Stay tuned for part 2. Now in part 2, we'll continue discussing his latest work, Swagger. We'll also discuss guilt and shame, and also we'll talk about the exchanged life that we have in Christ as believers. Now, all of Preston's links with all of his resources can be found below. Until next time.